You really believe that the hunters needs to generate their own leads? Can you expand on
If you
that?
don't know how to generate your own lead as a hunter, you're not really hunting. If someone's going to trip the deer and tie it for you and you just get to go and shoot it, I wouldn't call that a traditional hunter. A hunter is the one that has to say, what are the best months of the year for hunting? When am I allowed? What time of the day am I best suited to hunt? Right?
Welcome to the Break Free podcast. I am your host, David Mansella. Today we have with us a very special guest, Sherry Orel. Sherry, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Sherry, for the audience, can you tell me your actual full name, where do you live, and what do you do for a living?
Yeah, that's great. So Sherry Orel, I live just outside of Manhattan on the Jersey side. And I currently am doing two things. I am the founder and CEO of Next Level Catapult, which is a business that I started about 2 years ago to help entrepreneurs primarily, but CEOs and business leaders scale their company a little smarter, a little faster with their entire leadership team. The goal ultimately, but not always, is to prepare a company for a meaningful exit. So I can sit alongside them and prepare them for that, and then potentially bring them to market with my role as a managing director with STS Capital. So STS Capital is a sell-side investment banking firm that takes mid-market companies to market, primarily focusing on selling to strategics, where you can traditionally get above market valuations when you're selling to a strategic buyer versus an institutional investor, potentially a private equity company, investment banking firm, et cetera. So that's what I do.
Excellent. Now, tell me, when you said mid-market, well, how much revenue per year are we talking about?
Generally speaking, probably my clients on the Next Level Catapult perspective are in the $15 to $250 million range. Generally entrepreneurial founded and continue to be entrepreneurially run. Not a lot of PE or outside investment. I also do work with some earlier stage companies that are in the early stages of raising capital, angel investment, Series A. I've found some interesting opportunities particularly in fintech and martech. So those have been exciting. But generally speaking, from a coaching perspective, relatively mature companies that are set up as you would expect a mature company would be. But whatever got them to where they are today, that $40 million mark, how do you turn that to 75? Typically what got you here won't get you there. And being able to have someone come in like myself, who's got 30 plus years of experience taking companies to market from a CEO perspective, having sat in their same seat during this process, allows me to come at a different angle. From an STS perspective, mid-market, probably the $25-50 million low end, up to $1 billion of valuation typically is our normal sweet spot. But we look at every opportunity on its merit and evaluate the opportunity as they come in.
That's wonderful. So when you approach these businesses, you are actually do consulting with them to bring them up to the next level before you sell them?
Sometimes some of my STS clients come already ready to market, and we package them and take them to market in a traditional, 9 to 12 month time period. Other times, my coaching clients are 6 to 36 months away from being able to maximize their value. So I'll come along at some point during that journey and get them ready. I do also have clients that never want to sell. They're lifestyle businesses. Some of them are second generation and third generation family businesses. Others are entrepreneurs that have been building their companies from nothing, and they want to drive to $100+ million in annual sales. And so I help them on that journey as well. And I have a team. It's not just me. So we assign the right coaching team to meet all of the needs as that client currently stands today, and do it in a very efficient way that we can just bring the right solutions to the right leaders within that group. So if the head of sales really needs to shore up or change the way they go to market, we'll put them with a sales master. If their head of marketing doesn't want to hire an outside agency but wants to accelerate their knowledge and their capabilities, we'll put a marketing master with them.
That's wonderful. And it's amazing that you're able to add so much value to established businesses. Let's look back in time. I love entrepreneurs and how they actually became entrepreneurs. So I want you to think back on your last year of high school. Where were you at and what was in your mind? Because it was a very important fork in your life, right?
It
A
was.
decision-making time.
It was, and I am quite certain I have a unusual path to the corner office because I graduated high school at 17. Parents who were very supportive, but the college route was not only not available to me, it wasn't really even encouraged. So I decided at a very young age that I knew I needed to have a career and I needed to make money, not the traditional grow up, get married, have kids, be a housewife expectation. So I needed to figure that out. So I was working multiple part-time jobs and wanted something a little bit more stable. So at 19 years old, I became the receptionist at a company that I would have called at the time a marketing company for $18,000 a year. I turned down $19,500, which was a big difference when you were 19 years old, to go be a receptionist at an architecture firm because I just felt the marketing firm had more advancement to grow. It turned out to be a division of News Corporation. And within 3 weeks of asking for more, because I was bored out of my mind simply answering phones at the switchboard, I was promoted, and that really began my journey of a career. Figuring out how to do that was my first probably entrepreneurial endeavor. Then I grew up in sales, migrated to marketing, began leadership in management, and that really started my journey. But the role and the path that I took often ended up being an intrapreneur at whatever organization I was at. So I have a knack for seeing the nugget of something, of possibility, and figuring out how to scale it. I never envisioned myself back then as the person that would create that concept in your own garage or your own, home office and start a business from scratch. So I really made a 30-year career out of working alongside other entrepreneurs and helping them take their business up, scaled, and then eventually to market. So my first journey with my own company was in 2021 when I started Next Level Catapult, because I decided I wanted to spend all of my time doing the things that I loved the most, that I was particularly good at. And that was scale businesses with and through people and with the right strategic vision, coupled with the operational execution to get that vision to market. So that's what I did in 2021, started Next Level Catapult.
Oh, congratulations. That's beautiful. On your first job, how long did you last there?
9 years.
9 years. And you learn all kinds of things with multiple promotions, I guess.
Exactly.
What was what do you excel at on that first job? Like, what was your niche?
So the natural progression at News Corp at that time, was News America, was what it was called, was to hire young whippersnappers right out of college into client services or account coordinator roles, and eventually turn them into salespeople, then eventually sales managers. So that was my journey from receptionist. Normally, most of them didn't start out at the switchboard, but I grew up and eventually started servicing large accounts. I think at 19, my biggest account was Ralston Purina in St. Louis at the time, which was $35 million. So I was exposed to very large accounts off the bat. So I was never afraid of big money, big dollars when it came to servicing accounts. I eventually started selling on the side, which was the normal path. So telemarketing accounts, Buffalo Don's artesian drinking water in Wisconsin, I think was my first real account. But then eventually was full-time sales, continued to break every sales record that was set before me, and eventually moved from Chicago to Boston to become a manager of the Northeastern region. And that's how I finished my career at News Corporation.
What happened? How did you exit that?
So at that point in time, I was 26 years old, maybe 27. I'd been there for 9 years. I had risen up through the ranks so quickly. I kind of got my high school education and my first job under my belt at the same time. And I felt like I hadn't quite learned enough. Now I was management and people were looking at me for all the answers, and I felt like I didn't necessarily have them. So an opportunity presented itself to go start with a company at the time that was called Sampling Corporation of America. An entrepreneur had started it. It was a product sampling distribution company for the consumer packaged goods industry. And they delivered samples anywhere from, your kids' daycare, you get a gift when you pick your child up, or first day of school, things like that. So I went there to take on primarily another sales role. So I didn't immediately go back into management. So one could argue it was not only a non-lateral move, but it might have been a step back, but I felt it was an important step back. And so I really learned a lot about that side of marketing services and the operational complexity of a company that was distributing millions and millions of product samples on behalf of the CPG industry. So I think my first year, my sales goal was $1.5 million. So now I've gone from running, a $50+ million territory to $1.5 million sales goal. And my one account was Procter Gamble. So I didn't know if that was a lot or a little. Did come to find out that the brands that I was servicing the previous year had only done about $700,000 of revenue. So my mentor at the time, I did tease quite a bit lately that he did me the gift of giving me 100% increase in the sales goal out of the gate. So he probably felt that was a stretch. I did $7 million my first year and broke
$7 million from 700,000.
Broke a lot of things on the way in. So I really had to learn what happens when you push that red button. So I needed to learn the operations side. I needed to understand what really could be done, even if we had never done it, because I was selling way outside the lines. And in the process of learning that, I became a better salesperson and then eventually a sales leader. And we took that company and eventually sold it for over $250 million to a strategic agency buyer that eventually was Havas through a couple of M&A roll-ups. But that was another 8 or 9 years, and eventually led a sales team, eventually was on the executive committee looking at all the M&A acquisitions, the tuck-ins, the integration, and all of that. So that was my master's degree, was the time that I spent at Havas/Euro.
I asked one of my guests in this podcast, I asked him, because he had gotten a business degree and he was broke from the business loans. And then he asked one of his mentors whether he should do a master's. And his mentor told him, instead of spending the money on the master's, grab that money and start your own business. And you're going to learn so much more. And then if you want, you can go back and do your master's, but I think it's time. And then he became a very successful entrepreneur.
That's a great story.
Look at what's happening to you. Quick question, like 700,000 to 7 million in 1 year is a 10x improvement in 12 months.
Yes. Now that you mention it is.
It's crazy. So tell me, how do you accomplish that the other salesperson that you created so much value?
So transparently, the business was small. I want to say the business was 4 to 7 million. I don't recall at the time, but it was pretty small. And the founder was doing what many founders do, which is the role that I now come in and play as a coach and consultant, is the founder was doing everything. So the founder was a great guy named Steve Kaplan. He went on to write a very successful series of books called Make Big Happen. But Steve, not Make Big Happen, it's Bag the Whale. So Steve knew and got some advice from somebody that he was consulting with that said, you can't be the number one salesperson of the company and scale. So he had been calling on Procter Gamble himself because he was the only one that could do it in his mind at the time. And it was a huge risk and, a point of nervousness for him to give over some of that control to somebody else. So he had some faith and hired me. I had really solid background. And he took a chance. So he gave me the brands that he had most neglected, that seemingly had the least amount of obvious opportunity from a product sampling distribution perspective. So he had all the beauty care brands. Of course, you're going to want to try an eye cream or an eyeshadow or a lipstick or a shampoo maybe before you buy it. But things like baby care, laundry care, the OTC brands, the Vicks, the NyQuils, they weren't as obvious of a sampling opportunity. So it was part serendipitous of me, and the timing of sampling as a tactic in the marketing mix was also pretty still new and sexy. So the stars aligned for sure in a certain way, and I happen to be there to capitalize on it. So a little bit of hard work, a lot of hard work, and a little bit of luck makes success. And doesn't that really always work that way, right? Yeah. Lucky people tend to have worked really hard. So
I call it faith, right?
Yes.
So I'm a God-fearing person, and it's incredible how things sometimes happen, right? Like, not only you were able to 10x that account, but being able to fulfill it. Because one thing is to do the sale, another thing is to fulfill the product and make sure that the client is happy.
Yeah, and that's why knowing what happens when the red button is pushed. And that was also my beginning of really understanding the importance of sales and operations to work together. I came into an environment that had a normal sales versus operation conflict that seems to be very common in heavy operational and sales-driven environments. Salespeople go and sell things, and they get to go to lunch and take clients to the Knicks game, and they make a big mess, and then they get the commission, and they leave it for us to clean up, was the typical sales versus operations challenge. And I realized how important it was that I had the operations team on my side. So from the beginning, I tried to really understand everything that I needed to know to make the execution not only meet my clients' needs, but not create crazy stress on the organization. Because my second year I sold 15 million. My third year I sold 22 million. And then they did the beautiful thing of promoting me to manage a team to handle all the accounts that I called on. I remember the controller after my third year came in and he was really set up by the CEO, but he came in and he said, these commission checks are getting really big. And it was June of whatever year, and Q2 commission checks are going to be due the next week. And I said, I know. And he said, has anybody talked to you about a cap? And I knew he'd been set up. So I think he'd been set up partially as a joke, but let's test this and let's send in Pete to test the waters as the unwitting victim. And I said, yeah, I know. No one's talked to me about a cap, but I'm really glad that you're bringing this up because I'm tired and I would really love to take the rest of the year off. So if you have a hard time keeping the 97% of the revenue, then I don't want to burden you with that. Right. And that was the last conversation we had about a cap, but they did then promote me, which in many instances results in a pay cut, but it was the right time, and it was a good opportunity for me to step back up into management.
That's incredible. And one of my first jobs in life was to do sales. I was working for a factory that made shampoos and conditioners. It's crazy because I'm a computer scientist. I run a software consulting firm, and we build software business applications. That's what we do. But back then, when I was a kid, I was hired to sell these products and to wholesale. They had about 5 other salespeople, and I was the kid. I was a very young person. And sometimes being young and naive helps you, right? So I went into the marketplace, and within a year, I was the top seller. And I had the same commission as everybody else, but I made so much money that year that the CEO lowered my commission.
Yeah.
And gave me a cap.
Yeah.
And right. You don't know how demoralizing it was for me. I didn't have a base salary. It was all commission based. Right? All they will do is pay for my transportation and my expenses. But
yeah,
it was so demoting that I quit. I now imagine the harm that's the backward way of thinking for business owners. If I have as a rockstar salesperson on commission, I will never cap that commission. I will want him to make as much money as he can, because that means the whole business is doing well.
Yes. It's tricky, finding that sweet spot when, sometimes salespeople get to the point where they are no longer really hunting and they're just sitting on. opportunities for renewal. And sometimes that's a very appropriate business model. I'm working with a client right now that we've determined that 8 to 10 million is probably the cap per salesperson. And we need to decide, right? Decide whether the goal is to attract sales talent that will stay in hunter mode just enough to get to farming mode. And then we can scale the business. We know that for every salesperson, the first year they bring in 2, the next year they bring in 5, by the third year they're at 8. We can plan a 5-year plan of growth around scaling heads to meet those goals. Other times, what's more appropriate is to identify how to keep hunters hunting, because hunters are not easy to find, particularly in today's market, which is a whole nother conversation.
And they get bored farming, by the way.
They will get bored farming, or you can actually turn a hunter into a farmer through bad strategy. And then they forget how to hunt, and then they start to really like the farming. So if your goal is to keep some hunters hunting, you need to be able to prepare what that strategy looks like up front and communicate that so they don't end up disenchanted like you. So listen, your goal is to build a $4 million pipeline every year that closes, and then we will reassign 2 million of that every year, and you need to close that $2 million gap. So there's perpetual growth, and there's upside to doing that, and then they know that's the mission. When you are forced to or feel compelled to make those choices later, when you're not happy about somebody's commission check size or not happy about the amount of new business they're driving, it's really hard to change the rules. It can be done, but it needs to be done very, very delicately, for sure.
So it's better to have a strategic plan to begin with to see how you're going to grow the business, for sure, right?
Yes.
That's fascinating.
Or if you have to change, as I said, sometimes what got you here won't get you there. And if you've gotten here because you've got 3 salespeople that each sell the same $10 million every year, you're not going to be able to scale if that's the model. So you can approach with different hybrids. What do we bring new salespeople under? How do we gradually make some changes for the existing team that won't cause them to jump shit or, not perform? So there are ways to make those changes, but you have to be very intentional when you do things like that. Or like you leave, and we don't want that. So
see, this is how I treat my salespeople now. We're all on hunting mode all the time,
Yes.
And so what we do is, we're on software. So we have people that create new accounts. The hunters and the farmers are not the salespeople, are actually the business analysts, the people that are assigned to work on that account to deliver. So the production team has a farming role.
Yes, exactly.
Which is working great for us.
Exactly. Really smart.
So what happened after that? And now I know how you learned, how you know so much about scaling a business.
Yes, from the ground up. So, I think going back to your first question of what happened after high school, I think even in high school, I often had a attitude, maybe a naivety. I don't know. People have asked me about this in the past, of how hard can it be, right? So I made a brand for myself and a career out of constantly finding myself in rooms that I either had been invited to be in or had accidentally found myself, with the ability to say yes a lot and the mindset of, this can't be that hard. So I'm going to get in and I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to learn and make mistakes. But failure is only a reality if that is the end destination. So if there's a series of important learning to a goal, then all of those things that others might view as failure, maybe normal people would view as failure, I just viewed as, okay, so that didn't work. Let's try it this way. So continued with the how hard can it be? So I eventually left Euro, kind of during the age of the dot-com boom, and went to some smaller companies, joined with an agency, marketing agency group to learn the agency side of the business, because I had always been on the vendor/supplier side of the business. Spent a little time there, and then I got pursued by a man named Brian Martin, who eventually I partnered with. He had started a company called Vacation Connections, and he had studied the sampling model from the previous company that I had helped build and exit. and he wanted to start a similar company with a few different nuances. And his model was to give free samples to people through hotels and cruises while they were on vacation. And he knew my background. I was now 3 years the other side of my 3-year non-compete, and started again with his team when I think they were $3 or $4 million of revenue. Went into a sales and sales leadership role initially, and help him scale that business. That we had a couple different private equity investors, but eventually sold that business for about $160 million, which at the time was a really interesting model. They did about $15 million of EBITDA off of a $35 million revenue, which is very unusual. And
that's crazy high.
They were able to position, we were able to position the company at an 11 multiple. So it was a pretty decent exit. Shortly after that, I made a power play to take over the company as CEO. I had a competitive offer to do that elsewhere, and I was ready to run a company and wanted to do it where I was comfortable and where I knew the business, and I was presented that opportunity. So I became CEO in 2010 and ran that company until 2017, when we exited to a strategic buyer, Advantage Solutions, out of Orange County.
It's beautiful. So what you're doing now is a culmination of all your life experiences throughout your career.
Exactly.
It's beautiful, right?
Thank you.
And for entrepreneurs that are listening, either you have a partner that knows how to sell, or you are a salesperson yourself. That's something that wasn't in my mind. I started my business in 2005 as a software architect. I was actually, a tech leader in many multinationals. And I thought, I'm just going to write software for businesses, and that people are going to look for me. And I didn't want to associate myself with a sales role, because I thought sales was lazy people,
Right.
What a mistake. It actually hindered my growth for 5 years. I only did word of mouth. I still believe my best project is my last project. And word of mouth is a specific part of our strategic growth. But once I opened my eyes and realized I needed to become a salesperson, a professional salesperson, otherwise I wouldn't have a business, that's when everything started to turn around. And what you mentioned with the guy, your boss was the owner, he was doing all the sales. That is so true. It's impossible for you to scale a business if the owner is still doing most of the sales.
Exactly.
It makes no sense. And it took me 10 years to understand that.
And I think you bring up a really valid point that exists either out loud or in the back of many people's minds, is that being a salesperson is kind of icky. Like when many people think used car salesperson in front of any, right? And I apologize to all used car salespeople, because, it's hard work, but there's just this distasteful perception of a salesperson is trying to get me to do something I don't want to do. And when they do, they get compensated for that. So the reality is, we're all influencers. So people used to say everyone's in sales. Everyone in the company is in sales. Well, I said that a few times to people who were not in sales and who did not like that. I am not a salesperson. I don't want that pressure. I don't want that brand. I don't want that expectation. So the reality is that we all influence situations around us unconsciously all day long. Whether you're negotiating with a child or a spouse, where we're going to go to dinner or how much time we're going to spend studying, whether you're convincing a colleague to do something a certain way that you prefer, or to work a few extra hours to get something done. We are all influencing. So when I was at Brand Connections, we created a presentation called The Tools of Influence. And we've used some of the footprints of others that have embraced this concept. But we share 7 tools that all of us already use, and are tools that are being used on us, even if we don't know it. And we look at the journey, the consumer journey, the customer journey, from the time that they first identify their own secret need, all the way to the point where they actually make a buying decision. How can we be a part of that journey and influence appropriately using multiple tools of the trade to do that? So not only do I give that modified and updated, because by the way, what worked 10 years ago doesn't work now, because none of us have landlines anymore. So there's no list that you can get to get someone's personal cell phone. People aren't even in the office anymore. People don't want to go out to lunch. So things have changed. So we continuously update this based on what the modern journey needs to look like. But not only do I give it to sales teams, we give it to entire companies and position it that this is how we all influence retention, cross-selling, upselling, new product launches, farming versus gathering versus hunting. So, it's the landscape has changed and has become even more difficult than it ever was, and now you've got sales teams that have to deal with an avalanche of marketing qualified leads from an internal marketing resource that'll dump thousands of leads that may or may not be ranked or prioritized and present huge distractions for hunters that really should be out generating some of their own leads. So the sales dynamic has definitely changed.
Do you really believe that the hunters needs to generate their own leads? Can you expand on that?
If you don't know how to generate your own lead as a hunter, you're not really hunting. If someone's going to trip the deer and tie it for you and you just get to go and shoot it, I wouldn't call that a traditional hunter. A hunter is the one that has to say, what are the best months of the year for hunting? When am I allowed? What time of the day am I best suited to hunt, right? We even teach day part selling, right? Because if you work really late and send a bunch of emails to people at 8 o'clock at night so that you can check your box, by the time that group of people gets that email at 9 in the morning, or when they're, getting ready for work at 7 in the morning, they're swiping a lot of this stuff. And your chances of getting attention in certain industries can be time linked. Is it over lunch? Is it right before lunch? Is it any time before 3? How can we get smart? So the hunter mentality is somebody that can think through those things. What weapons should I bring? By the way, I have a bunch. I can choose a bow and arrow, a rifle, a knife, a trap, but not every tool works in every situation. So which tools do I bring to client B when I know this set of facts versus client C that I know another set of facts? That's the hunter mentality. And yes, they can take some great marketing qualified leads and really accelerate them and maybe have a higher close ratio because of their hunter mentality. But if you completely make them lose practice of how to truly hunt, they will forget. And then you will be relying on marketing to generate the leads for your expensive sales team. Mm-hmm. And so finding that sweet spot has definitely been critical for the success of a number of the companies that I've run and the clients that I support.
That's beautiful. And now I can see how much value you are bringing to the new companies that you help scale and sell, right? Because I know that's the hinder. Like, you could have a beautiful product, you could have an awesome operations team, but if you don't know how to sell, you will never make it.
Right.
Isn't it?
Exactly.
What has been the biggest problem in your career and how do you overcome it?
Oh, there have been so many things that I have learned. I'm very decisive and I can make very quick decisions. Knowing when to do that and knowing when not to do that has been a journey that I've been on. Not reacting in real time to volatile situations has also been something that I've learned and taught myself, and I don't do it all the time. I sometimes have to remember to teach myself that. So nobody's perfect, but it's also something that I coach around because that seems to be a common wish of individuals when we're working on personal growth. I really want to be able to show up in real time to situations and react the way in real time that I wish I would have reacted when I think about it later. So that I think is important. And really learning to listen, because I'm decisive and I'm very fast and I can see 2 and 3 steps ahead of what's likely to happen. If I am, and somebody taught me this once and I teach it to others, so I won't take credit for it, but to learn to listen without the intention of responding. Because when you're listening differently, you'll react differently and you'll certainly hear more. One of the things that I incorporated within most of the businesses that I run that I still use to this day is when I'm participating in a meeting with a colleague. So if it was a salesperson that I was training back in the day, or a colleague today, I will religiously ask after the meeting, what did you learn? Mm-hmm. And I became a bit famous for this, to the point where my sales team would tell new salespeople, be ready, because if she goes on a meeting with you, she's going to ask you what you learned. And I'm not looking for, oh, they said they're launching a new product, so I should probably get a proposal, or there's a new marketing director, so got to reach out to that person. It wasn't what did you write down? It was what did you learn by what was said, by what wasn't said, by the body language. When did they take a note? What were you saying when they took a note? When they said there's a new marketing director, what we learned was there's a good chance that change is coming, because whenever there's a change in leadership, somebody's going to want to put their stamp, and nobody got promoted for doing the thing that the previous guy did. So we now know we need to make sure that there's enough flexibility in what we're proposing that they can make it their own and champion it so that they're the hero of it, right? So those types of questions force you to listen differently, so that you're not just prepared to have something really smart to say when Sherry asks you what you learned. You're actually listening now habitually for the real opportunity, so that what ends up happening isn't just you feel less nervous when I travel with you, it's that the lead into that meeting caused you to ask different questions, so you knew what to prepare. You presented very specific things. You listened differently. You followed up with a proposal that actually met a need that you uncovered, that has a higher percentage of closing than had you not. So our outreach to meeting, to proposal, to conversion ratios are improving through listening skills and through how we choose to approach each idea. We're not chasing wild goose chases just so that we can say we've got $5 million of our pipeline, when really only $1 million of it is real. So let's focus our efforts at closing that $1 million and finding $1 million more real. So those, I would think, would be sort of the two biggest learnings that I continue to learn and focus on in my own journey and those of my clients.
It's beautiful. I could be talking to you the whole afternoon about this, because it's fascinating to respect your time. Thank you so much for being here, by the way. Number one, what advice would you give to an entrepreneur that has probably $1 million or $2 million business that they do most of the sales? What advice would you give this entrepreneur to really scale their business past $5-10 million?
Yeah. So I would read the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. I would actually listen to it on audio, because the audio version has Dan Sullivan, who is a world-renowned coach, being interviewed by the man that he outsourced the writing of his book. So it's like you get a little extra fireside chat. But the moral of that book is you can't do everything. You need to understand what you are uniquely qualified and equipped to do and what you enjoy, and stay in your lane and figure out how to identify the other who's, right? Who are the other who's, and how can you engage them in your business to move you further along? And when revenue's tight and you think, I can't afford to hire a salesperson, get creative. Used outsourced services, outsourced sales companies. Find somebody that can do some marketing for you. But if you try to do it all yourself, you will be hindering your long-term growth for short-term need. Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Sherry, for being on the show. The last question is, if you had access to write something on a billboard that is in front of a busy highway, what would you write in it?
Oh, yes. I think it would be an empowering message. It would be my quote of how hard can it be, right? How hard can it be?
And when you ask yourself that question, what you're doing is you're diminishing your limiting beliefs, and you're putting away that fear, because we have this unfounded fear, especially when we try to go into sales.
Yes.
And everybody's looking for what you have. All you got to do is look for the right person that needs what you have to offer. You're actually fulfilling a need when you're selling something that is of value.
Yeah. So when we used to live on business cards,
right?
You're right. And when we used to all have business cards. I would give my new salespeople an engraved silver business card holder that I don't know that we've ever sourced who said it, but that quote, what would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail? So if you knew somebody told you, sit at the slot machine and keep pulling it, it is going to pay off, the big payout. You just need to sit here long enough to do it. You would sit at that slot machine until your arm fell off. So this, how hard could it be, is a similar question, but it takes the negative out of it. I've chosen to eliminate words that have negative correlation, and failure, fail, plant something in your subconscious. And I want people to be moving towards things, not away from things.
Exactly.
So how hard can it be really breaks it down to the essence of you just start. Nike coined the phrase, just do it, right?
Just do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sherry, thank you so much. If people like to hire your services, where can they find you?
They can reach out to me at Sherry at nextlevelcatapult.com.
Nextlevelcatapult.com. Sherry, thank you so much. Please keep making this world a better place. You're always welcome here. Talking sales for us is amazing, because that's one of the biggest pillars in any organization, right? Thank you so much for being here, and have a wonderful week.
Great. And then secondly, also from a exit perspective, SORL at stscapital.com if you have clients that are ready to exit.
stscapital.com.
Yes,
Beautiful.
SORL at stscapital.com.
So to make it clear, if you have a business and you want to grow it to sell, go to the first link. The second link is for when you're ready to sell, you want to do the sell, you go to STS Capital, right?
Yes, exactly.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sherry. Have a wonderful week.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.